Hey everybody, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the new battery grip that's available for the Z6 II and the Z7 II. Just to let you know, this video is being recorded on a full production Z6 II at 4K at 25 frames per second, and I'm using eye tracking. When Nikon announced the Z6 and Z7, there was a lot of photographers that didn't like the fact that there was no support for a battery grip. Nikon provided a battery pack that allowed you to increase battery life, but it didn't have any usable buttons. There was no shutter button, front or rear command dial, and that was one of the things that a lot of photographers really disliked. So for the Z6 II and the Z7 II, we now have a new battery grip that has full controllable buttons and full connection to the camera as well. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of people that do have a Z6 and a Z7, and they're going to want to know, can I use this new battery grip with your existing Z6 and Z7? And the answer to that is no, unfortunately you cannot. So because the battery grip relies on the new connectors inside of the Z6 II and the Z7 II, when you actually connect this battery grip to a Z6 or a Z7, nothing happens. Like, it doesn't even power the camera on. So if you do have a Z6 or a Z7, don't buy this grip. It's only for Z6 II and Z7 II. So just want to be clear on that. And, you know, just for clarification's sake, it's not like it's a firmware thing, it's an actual connector thing. So the original Z6 and Z7 just didn't have the connectors inside the camera to connect to a battery grip like this. That's why it had to be added in Z6 II and Z7 II. So when it comes to the grip itself, ergonomically, I actually really like it. I've never really been a fan of grips. When we look back at kind of my DSLRs, D500, D850, D750, I never really used a grip with those cameras. I never felt like I needed to use a grip anyway. There was a couple of occasions where I used the grip on a D850 for the faster frame rate, but that was not something that I would do all the time. It would be on a rare occasion. To actually like a grip is quite strange for me, but I do like the handling of it, and I do like how it handles with the Z6 II and the Z7 II. Ergonomically feels really nice for me. I actually really like this little flick here that rests under your thumb. So when you are shooting, that thumb just kind of rests nicely on this little flick that you have on the back of the grip. I really like that. It just makes it a lot comfortable, and it's easy to hold. I think it fits my hand quite nicely. In terms of controls on the grip, we have a front and rear dial, so we can control obviously shutter speed and aperture settings. We then have a shutter button on the top of the grip, and that shutter button is lockable, so you can lock that if you don't accidentally press it when you're actually not using the grip. We then have a function button on top of the grip as well, and then on the back of the grip we have an AF on and a auto-focusing toggle or joystick, depending on what you want to call it. So that's it for actual commands and buttons of the grip. We also then have a locking dial. And one of the strange things, I was used to kind of a grip that has two locking dials, so one at the back of the grip and one at the front of the grip. So it was a bit strange for me to get used to just having one locking dial. I always tried to reach and try and get one at the front and one at the back as well. And you'll also notice at the back end of the grip, we have an A and a B that have little illuminated lights next to them. Those lights are for when you're charging. So you can use this grip as a dual battery charger, and that's something that I've done for quite a while. So when we look at the previous grip, which was the battery pack that was available for the Z6 and Z7, I actually used that quite a lot as a charger, because what you could do is you could put two batteries in it and just charge it using any USB-C plug. It means that I didn't have to carry a charging brick, and I didn't have to carry my separate cable for that. It meant I could just carry less. I just had the camera grip and then my USB-C charger that I also have for my Mac, and it just meant that it was easier for me to charge. So one of the features that I'm also going to use in this grip is the fact it can be USB-C charged. So we have a USB-C port on the side of the grip. One big observation is that obviously how the grip connects to the camera and how it communicates with the camera as well. We have these connection pins on the top, and obviously because it sits inside of the battery compartment in your camera, you can't have a battery in the camera at the same time. So you have this battery compartment that slides into your camera. It also has a really nice spot for the battery door. So because you need to remove the battery door, that battery door can be placed and locked into place inside the grip so that you don't lose that. Because it sits inside that battery compartment in the camera, you have two batteries, both of them inside the grip. And when it comes to those batteries inside the grip, there's a couple of different ways that you can remove those batteries. You can either remove the entire battery slider, and that will hold two batteries. So you can see that I've got both batteries in this individual slider. And that's if I want to take both of them out at the same time. If I do that, the whole camera will die. Okay, that's obviously removed all power. If I want to use the hot swappable feature of the grip, then what I would do is I will remove one battery at a time. Now, you can only remove one of those batteries. So when it comes to this slider in the camera, you have one battery that sits in what has been known as bank B, and that battery is kind of good to have as just full all the time. Your bank B is going to be the battery that's kind of in there all the time. Bank A is the hot swappable battery. So you can slide that in, and you can also then slide that back out and swap that over for a different battery. And as you're doing that, the camera will just automatically default to battery B, and you don't lose power. So you can continuously record, you can continuously keep shooting, swap the battery out, and you don't have to you don't have to worry about the camera disconnecting or turning off, because it will just automatically swap over to bank B. So what I would recommend is that you drain battery A, it swaps over to bank B, you put another full battery in, it goes back to bank A. So you never really drain battery B until it might be the end of the day or the end of the week, and then you just swap that out for a full battery again. So even though battery A might not be completely full, it will always divert back to battery slot A because that's your hot swappable slot. It will only divert to B if slot A is empty or slot A is just non-existent, so there's no battery in slot A. One thing to keep in mind as well about this slider, the batteries go in differently, and if you try to put them in the same way, you could end up breaking the actual slider or carrier itself. So battery B slides up and out, okay? And it's nice and simple to get that back in. You just slide that back in and then push down, and then it goes. Battery A, you can't push up. There's actually little pieces of plastic that are holding the battery in place. So all you need to do is just flick the yellow tab, and it will then slide out, and you pull it out, and then to put it back in again, you just push it back in and it locks in place. There is actually a spring-loaded catch that ejects the battery out of bank A, and that's obviously because bank A is that hot swappable section of the grip. Once that whole slider's back in there, you're good to go. The main door of the grip is also removable if you want to remove that, and it's separate from the USB-C port so that you don't have to have that main door open to access the USB-C port. They're both separate. One of the things that I don't really like about it, well, it's not really not a lot like about it, it's just, you know, one thing that I noticed that I don't really like is that it seems a little bit plasticky just on this top plate here. Everything else, the feel of the grip, the rubber used in the grip, the texture, the shutter buttons, the dials, and the AF toggle, they feel great. All the buttons and everything feel great. It's just this little top panel here, because there's no texture on it. It's not because it's not a textured piece of plastic. It just looks a tiny bit plasticky. That could just be me being a bit stupid, but it's not going to be the end of the world. It functions brilliantly, and it feels like it's a solid piece of kit as well. So it's just an observation, not necessarily a downside. One of the other concerns I had about this grip was when you're using it with an FTZ. Because the FTZ has this extended area that basically holds the tripod mount, and it also holds the motor for the aperture control adjustment as well, I kind of felt like when that's attached to the camera and then I'm holding the grip, what stops that from kind of hitting onto my fingers on the inside of the grip? That was something that I was worried about. But actually, for my hands, and I'll admit I don't have the largest hands in the world, but for my hands, I don't make contact with the FTZ. That's not a problem for me. But what I would say is that if you do have larger hands and you're planning on using this grip with an FTZ, you might run into some issues because there's not a lot of space between actually holding the grip and the base of the FTZ. So that is something to be aware of. As I mentioned, it's not caused me any problems, but if you do have much larger hands than me, then it could be something that does cause you an issue. So something that you might want to test or be aware of before you buy one of these grips, especially if you're planning on using it with an FTZ and some of those longer lenses. I've also been out using this grip with my 500 PF, obviously through the FTZ. No issues there either, but that's obviously for my size of hands. It depends on, you know, how big your hands are. One of the other things that's obvious is that there's no function buttons on the inside of the grip, and that actually, I went to try and push the function button while I was using the grip, and I was like, oh, there's no function buttons there, so that kind of caught me out. So one of the things that I'll tend to do when I'm shooting with my camera body is that I have function 2 assigned to my autofocusing settings, and they're just not there when I'm using the grip. So what I had to do was, when I am using that grip, I've assigned the function button on the top of the grip to my autofocusing settings. So when I use that function button, I can still switch between using AFS, AFC, and also using single point, dynamic, wide area, small, auto area, and so on. Just something that, you know, it caught me out. The first time I used it, I was just so in tune with trying to push a function button on the inside, and it just wasn't there. So I reassigned it to the function button on here. I'll also show you what the other different options are that are available for that function button, just so it gives you an idea of what you can customize these buttons to do. It is something that I actually quite like. I did think that, you know, I wasn't really going to use it, but I do actually quite like it, and especially because I do shoot a lot with longer lenses, it does feel a lot more comfortable in the hand, and ergonomically it just makes the camera feel nicer to hold as well. And it is something that I think I'll be using more. It doesn't make the camera too big or too heavy. It still allows me to have, you know, it still feels like I have a mirrorless camera. It is obviously heavier because of the extra battery weight and the extra grip itself, but it doesn't feel like it's too heavy. It doesn't feel like I've gone back to a chunky DSLR. And it still feels substantial and weighty in the hand for those longer lenses that I'll use it with as well. And as I mentioned, because it works okay with me with the FTZ, that's not going to be a problem for me either, but something to be aware of depending on the size of your hands. So I hope you found this video useful. And if you do have any questions about the grip, or you know, if there's anything you want me to test, not that there is much that I would test, it doesn't produce any images, it doesn't improve your picture quality in any way, shape or form. It doesn't look very sharp, it's got very rounded edges, but if there's anything you want me to test, or if there's anything you want to know, then let me know and I can answer those in the comments below, or I can make another video about it if it really needs to. But generally speaking, I'm happy with it. I know there's going to be some of you that still want a grip like this for the original Z6 and Z7, just unfortunately they don't have the connectors inside the body for such a grip like this, so the only grip that will be available for Z6 and Z7 is obviously that battery pack that's already available, and that obviously increases your battery life but doesn't have the buttons like we have here. So as always, thank you so much for watching. It really means a lot and it surprises me every day. But again, thank you for watching. Goodbye.